So this weekend, we went to a summer solstice festival in my hometown, which is fairly small.
And it sounds more woo-woo than it was. Like summer solstice, that makes me think like pagan fertility ritual.
You're no fun. It's just the alliteration. Summer solstice. It sounds eclectic and feel good. And
pagan. But it wasn't. It seemed wholesome. You got a crocheted cross. Someone gave you a cross.
I was selling my children's book at this summer solstice festival. In case you didn't know, I authored a children's book. It feels weird to say that out loud. We had just the one boy at the time, and I was kind of dabbling in self-employment gigs. And I realized as he was growing up, he was born in Washington, D.C., and I was pregnant with him while I was working in Congress. And I realized at one point, Jace and I would have to explain to him and his siblings what it is that we do for work and what we believe in, because it's not just like our 9 to 5. Like, we record this podcast. We will probably volunteer for someone's campaign if we like them enough. This is our professional world. It's our activist world. It's our church world. It's our everything. And so I was like, well, how do I explain to a 3-year-old what freedom is? And so I wrote a book that describes it. It's called What Does It Mean to Be Free? And I was really inspired by another book, What Do You Do with an Idea?
Kobe Yamada.
By Kobe Yamada. He has several books, and I recommend all of them. He does not do the artwork, and he has different artists in all of the books, but they are beautiful, they are gorgeous, and they're big, like 30,000 foot level idea books. So yes, What Do You Do with an Idea? But he also has another one called What Do You Do with a Problem? And Trying. And the Trying book is a boy trying to make a sculptor, like this older, very talented sculptor. And he tries and fails, but this sculptor acts as a mentor to him, and eventually he builds something at the end, and he's proud of it, and he just said all you have to do is keep trying. It's beautiful. It takes a lot of talent, I think, to condense those big ideas down into something digestible for little kids.
Yeah, I mean, how are you going to engage a little kid with an abstract concept?
Mm-hmm.
Like, they have no sense of logic or whatever. You're introducing these ideas for the first time, but also trying to make it fun.
Mm-hmm.
It's a fun challenge.
So I hired a really talented illustrator. She lives in Ukraine, or Belarus, actually.
Mm.
And this was before the war. Important for context. And she was really good. She is a mom. And then I also hired an art director out of Tennessee to help me. And she's also a mom. So it was a team of 3 moms putting this together, which I thought I didn't do on purpose, but I thought was a sweet accident. And I raised all the funds for it on Indiegogo, just through my online community and friends and family, because that art director was expansive, y'all.
But she did a great job.
She did an excellent job. And I've had a lot of people message me about putting together their own children's books after doing my own. And she was worth the hire for the first time around, because not only did she help me communicate with the artist, but she helped me place that art onto the digital layouts that were necessary to actually get it printed. And I'm in these online communities with self-publishers, and that is a huge hang up for a lot of people. That's where a lot of people get stuck for a long time, because they don't know how it'll come off. They'll do a test print and their art is funky, or it doesn't go all the way to the edge of the page,
right, or
it gets skewed, or something like that happens. And then some of it, if you don't do it right when the artist is drawing it, it doesn't print correctly.
Oh.
And so though she was expensive, she probably saved me a lot of time and heartache in the long run, because she knew what she was doing and she had done this before.
Yeah.
She's also a good contact for me to have anyway, because she is also has relationships with like bulk printing. So like if I ever want to print thousands and thousands of copies to have on hand, she's someone who can do that for me with wholesale prices.
And we ran into that issue because COVID was still raging and there was a paper shortage and the prices kept going up. And well, we even heard Dave Ramsey talking about trying to launch books and they had to buy a bunch of paper in advance just so they would have enough stock.
Yeah. Yeah, it turns out that we get 80% of our paper from China.
I thought it was Canada.
Oh, I thought it was China.
Let's Google it. I'm pretty sure because it was a border dispute in a tariff war with Trump.
Oh.
Let me look. Okay, I'm wrong.
Yes. Is it China?
It's hard to say because a lot of these paper companies are multinational but based here. And they have to import the lumber that becomes paper. Oh. So it's complicated.
Okay.
But I remember during the Trump administration, there was a dispute with the Canadians about a tariff, either on paper and milk or on trees and dairy. It was a whole thing.
Okay. Anyway, that caused significant delays. So, but we're saying all of this because July 4th is next Tuesday. So if we publish this tomorrow, which will be Wednesday.
If you're listening to this on Wednesday, you still have time to teach your kids about what freedom means before July 4th.
Yeah. So if you want to have like a cute little July 4th unit with your kiddos, the book is probably best for ages 3 to 8.
Yeah.
And I'm going to make a post on Instagram later. I have had parents send me pictures of them reading it with their littles, it makes me want to cry. It is so special and so cute.
And you can find it on Amazon through that link. It's easy. We're estimating that Prime can get it to you before Tuesday.
Yeah, we're putting all of our faith in you, Amazon. There's a hardcover copy and then there's a paperback copy. You can get the paperback copy if you're on a budget, but I really do recommend the hardcover, not just because it means more money for me, but because with littles, you're going to you want the cardboard cover. And on the back page, there's a list of the people who helped me fund it. And the main character is modeled after my oldest son. And then the other characters in the book are me and Jace. And Odin, the Bernese Mountain Dog, is featured on a page in there too. And there's a bunch of other little Easter eggs. Oh, like the road in the book is yellow.
For Kansas.
Laura from Kansas, the yellow brick road. I'm giving you guys all the secrets. I'm trying to think what else. Oh, it was kind of awkward when I was writing the book and I was discussing my concepts with my art director and my artist, because there was a time in the book where I said something like, what does it mean to be free? Well, it's about doing what you should, not just what you can, but what you should, responsibility and discipline. Mm-hmm. And I wanted to show that meant included helping people. Okay, but what kind of people? And I wanted to show people who didn't look like us. And it's not like some big diversity concern that I had, but I think it is important to show, and not even just color of skin, though. I wanted to show difference in age and difference in relation and or even distance in relation, and even if somebody is a stranger, you still treat them with respect. And yes, if they have a different skin color than you. So I had to explain. Oh, and I wanted Odin in that page because we also treat animals with respect. We're here to shepherd the earth. Mm-hmm. And so I had to send this in a message because I'm communicating with these people online. Whereas if I were doing it in person, I probably could have softened it, but I had to specifically request the colors and types of people that I wanted drawn.
Fat, skinny, old.
So I was like, I want a young black man and I want an elderly person. You can choose the gender. And then I want a dog, and then here's a picture of our dog. And so it's just funny when you actually get down to the nitty gritty discussing. And so when we were talking about the Target thing with the tuck friendly swimsuit, I would give a lot to be in on those meetings when they were actually discussing the concept in detail with each other. Like, well, what's your pitch for our Pride Month merch collection? Well, I think that we should have a rainbow swimsuit that has triple layered crotch fabric in it to compress any penises. And we can call it, what are we going to call this? We're going to call it tuck friendly. Like, they were actually talking about this in detail with each other and having to look at each other in the face and talk about how to hide someone's penis. Live, laugh, lesbian backpacks.
Right.
I just can't imagine being in that situation.
I'm putting myself in their shoes now. Let me channel it. Okay. If Shauna goes to the pool like that, they're going to see a bulge. We need at least 3 more layers of fabric there, or they're going to know. Well, she lives in Texas now, and they can't get that kind of surgery, so we have to be able to advocate for this community. And this is how we do it. I know the Spanx lady's not returning our calls. We're just going to have to go on our own. I don't know if it's Gore-Tex or what. You need to put it more Lycra right there in the crotch. So,
is this explicit?
No, not explicit. It's just fraught waters where it's a live debate, right? How to treat...
How to tuck?
Well, yeah. How to tuck, but how to treat discrete and insular minorities with respect, to quote a Supreme Court case. So the main goal, I mean, the debate between grooming and whatnot is to one side, but I think if you're asking them how they see themselves, yes, they want to market these products as mainstream and worthy of acceptance and even praise. But I think the other impetus behind it is to sell things to these communities that feel like there are no options for them when they go to the store, and they want to have clothes that affirms whatever they think is going to make them feel better when they have gender dysphoria. And so these companies are trying to create products that they think that the customer thinks will help them, right? I'm trying to be precise. I don't think that will help them, but I think that's what everybody's playing at.
I'm calling and we'll bleep that out. That makes me mad.
Okay, why?
Because I have shopped at Target while pregnant. How many % of people in the population are trans versus how many people, what percentage of the population gets pregnant? Have you been to the Target maternity section?
Yeah, it's like one clothing
You can't find it because it's like 2 little stalls. There's hardly anything in it. I went to go find like a simple dress for a wedding or something. And at that point, I was pretty big pregnant because I couldn't fit into anything else, which is why I was going and looking for something. When you're that big pregnant, you just want something that covers your body and that people won't look at you when you go out. So I was very willing to sacrifice and buy something that I only liked like 60% of the way. But I couldn't find anything that I liked that much because they had about 2 options. And they didn't have my size because it was cleared out. And there's a ton of pregnant women out there who need to be clothed.
That's true. More than our trans. Yeah, I take your point.
They put very little effort into making those clothes cute and stylish, keeping them stocked, keeping them have a wide variety of options. And you know the demo that's going into Target is a lot of stay-at-home moms who are going to be pregnant and pregnant again after that. And you would think that if they were really cared about minority populations and being inclusive, that they would have a bigger maternity section, when at the same time they're going so far out of their way to cater to this percentage of the population that's like below 1%.
Yeah, that's a really good point in favor of it being a virtue signal versus a market signal.
Of course it is. That makes me angry. Like, if I'm supposed to buy that as a talking point, their maternity section should be half as big as their kids section at least.
That's true. I wasn't giving it as a talking point. I think that's how they see themselves.
Don't tug on me. Like, that makes me angry. Anyway.
So we don't shop at Target.
No, we don't. We should wrap this up. This isn't the direction that we discussed. So if you want to buy my book.
So if you want to be free to tuck or know what you should do, not what you can.
If you're looking around saying like, I want my kid to have values and understand the world and the truth, with a capital T, and I don't know where to start. And they're little. You should buy my book. Welcome to the Free State Podcast. This is episode 20, and today we will be talking about Robert F. Kennedy Jr.
Yes.
What's the F stand for?
I would assume
Franklin?
Francis, but
Oh.
let's look.
We've been seeing a lot of people in our circles talk about him, and people are saying, well, how do you feel about RFK? Because he seems kind of like this edgy, but not just edgy for the sake of being different.
Robert Francis. He's got some opinions that are out of the mainstream when it comes to healthcare and food and pollution, and we get into all of that.
For today's podcast, we listened to an interview by Joe Rogan with him, and then you listened to an interview by Jordan Peterson with him.
And I listened to several podcasts just talking about him in general.
I watched his pitch on Twitter, like his pitch for president. And it was very good. He just like grabbed this crickety old chair and did it in front of a pond or something.
Oh, that's
and cool. It was like, he's just like us. So if you enjoyed today's podcast, as always, the best way to help show your support is to send this episode to a friend or a family member. You can also give us a good review on Spotify or Apple, and
that'll boost us in the algorithm and more people will be able to discover the show. And as always, if something we said pisses you off, please let us know. We'd love to talk about it.
And if you really do think that it was the war of northern aggression,
or that atrazine doesn't turn the frogs gay,
you can send us a voice message and we will talk with you that way on air. Actually, I think that'd be really fun.
I do too. And you can leave us those voice messages at anchor.fm/freestate. But if you just want to leave a general comment, we check our email at freestatepod@gmail.com.
Enjoy. All right. Let's keep the party going by talking about vaccines.
Yeah. So Laura's been wanting to talk about vaccines for a while. And
Not really.
Well,
yeah.
I have been skeptical because I've been on a journey.
We've all been on a journey.
We've all been on a journey. But I grew up, you do what the doctor says because they're the doctor. It's ironic because in my career, one of the major arguments I have in the section of politics I focus on is that we can't trust experts. If you live in a free society, we have to talk about issues and figure out what's good because that's not just a math problem. We're going to figure it out with experience over time. Everybody's going to have a different perspective and we're going to muddle through, hopefully towards something good. I didn't apply that elsewhere in my life because I guess I compartmentalize. And so when I think about vaccines and medicine, at least prior to COVID, I thought, well, the doctor says I have this problem. This is a medicine that was developed to address that problem. Therefore, take the medicine, vaccine, whatever. And I didn't give it a second thought because that's what doctors are for.
Medicine and science like that is also, though, kept off to the side as like this prohibited terrain where it's like you need to leave that to someone who knows better. Because as a mom, where I'm having to make some of these decisions or manage some of these decisions on behalf of my children, I'm realizing how little I was taught ever.
Oh, yeah.
By the school system or by my own family or mentors. Medicine is something I was taught so little. My dad taught me how to turn the water off to the toilet. My mom taught me what an angel food cake pan is. These are everyday things that you run into. But nobody told me what an antihistamine was.
I guess my background was a little different. Since I have such severe allergies, I knew what an EpiPen was. I knew what Benadryl was. But anything beyond that, if you have a headache, take Advil.
Yeah.
We didn't talk about what that might do to your stomach.
I've seen it put this way, we're all following a script that was written for us. And so are medical doctors. Most medical doctors. We're all just following this script that was written for us by someone else, by an expert. And And so...
And it's terrifying to see that relationship between expertise and living is copied and pasted all across every aspect of our lives. We don't grow our food. We don't make our clothes. We don't pick our medicine. How many of you really do your own theology? Not even that I'm advocating that, but how many of us have studied theology in depth to really know the truth about God? We don't even maintain our own cars anymore to the extent. I just saw a commercial the other day. Now they have, it's not self-driving, but there's new GMC trucks that can do an auto lane change when you have cruise control on. So we're headed towards iRobot, but we have and it's not control. The control is an illusion anyway. Huh?
Wally.
Yeah, we're headed toward Wally. But even then, if you're trying not to be a fat roly-poly like the humans were in Wall-E, do you intuitively know how to exercise? I mean, you generally know you should sleep more, go outside, and move your body. But we defer to personal trainers and blogs, and there's wars about that too. How are we supposed to know anything about anything? We didn't listen to our families. For the most part,
our
families don't know either. Yeah, it's a generational gap.
Part of the problem is that no one was raised by their parents. They were raised by the state. They were raised by the public school system.
I don't know if it's too dramatic to say that we might be in a new dark ages. Just like at the time that I'm talking about, in the medieval period, knowledge was still around.
Yes.
But only the monks and the people copying the Bible and studying those things knew anything. Everybody else was illiterate. It feels very similar today.
Yeah, I think in the last 5 years, I've had several awakenings, red pills, whatever you want to call them, where I have lifted the curtain myself, just incidentally, or it's been lifted for me. And I have uncovered all of these worlds of knowledge, like these pools of knowledge, like birth, for example. If you just follow the script, you will be 39 weeks pregnant. They'll say, if you're tired of this, let's just schedule you for a C-section. And that's not an easy path to take, but it's normal.
Yeah, we've had lots of friends do that.
And so you schedule the C-section, and then, it turns out you have all of these complications. Or they schedule you for an induction, let's say. That's a better example. They schedule you for an induction. Yeah. And, it turns out that there are consequences for that. There's no free rides in nature, and your body's not ready, so you don't dilate enough. And then the body's under duress because you're under Pitocin, and so you're having constant contractions, which isn't supposed to happen. And that puts baby under undue stress, and so the heart rate is increasing, and you are called in for an emergency C-section, and that wasn't your plan. And then you're recovering from a C-section, and maybe you already have other kids in the home, and your husband goes back to work, and so you have this gaping wound in the second half of your body. There's other worlds, like vaccines is another one of those worlds where I had to lift this curtain and realized what is going on.
And before Laura went on that journey, all I had heard about was, is it Jenny McCarthy or Jenna? I think it's Jenny
McCarthy, yeah.
Talking on The View or something.
Oh, I used to make fun of her.
Well, yeah, everybody did.
It was one of those things that I used to say, like, they're really cool people. They're anti-vaxxers. But, you can get over that. If you can get past that, they're really smart.
Well, and it would make sense that we'd think that way because everyone around us in public school had to follow that vaccine schedule. So they're probably from families that inculcate that idea, right? And most people are in public school.
Mm-hmm. I'm glad we're talking about this during Pride Month because this sort of feels like coming out. I feel like I'm coming out right now.
In the that is a strong parallel because people feel nervous and like they're going to be discriminated against when they come out as an alternative sexuality. It feels dangerous to say.
Yeah, well, there are friends and family that I have not told.
Oh.
So here it is, folks. I'm just going to start at the beginning to just kind of set up the whole vaccine story. I'll try and make it brief. First kid, we did everything the doctor told us. I even made a joke in my third trimester when they were giving me the flu shot and I don't even know, another shot. when I was in my 3rd trimester.
TDAP.
Yeah, that's right. I was like, stick me with whatever you've got, doc. And so we did everything they recommended with the first time around. And by the grace of God, we had no complications with that, me or our baby. And then COVID happened. And I think I've had other moms message me, this is such a widespread phenomenon. COVID happened. And then people are like, I have to question everything now. Because it turns out the people who are writing these scripts for us, these medical experts, are either ignorant or malicious. And a mix of both is not good either. And so what's on the line is my kid's health. That's the number one thing.
And the argument that they'll give is that it's not ignorance, it's a rational risk calculation, that they see the risks of vaccines as so low that it doesn't matter because it's protecting you from a disease that would be way more harmful. So whatever risks there are, it's worth taking.
I too run the risk reward calculation. I do that crunch with everything. If the risk outweighs the reward, I'll make appropriate decisions. But every vaccine is different. And that's something that you just can't say out loud. That's one of those prohibited. That's a thought crime.
Well, it's one of those things I had never even thought about until COVID.
We weren't even asking, like, what's in them? How does this work?
Yeah. It was, the baby needs this, give him that. Cool. Mm-hmm. The CDC has a schedule of when you're supposed to do that. We asked the doctor about it. I remember asking the first baby's doctor about when certain shots would be due, and he said, we just follow the CDC guidelines. And I said, oh, okay. But
when you take them in for them, I think we would be lying if we said that it was comfortable. Like,
well, yeah,
when they have your 3-month-old infant and they're stabbing them with 3 different needles at once and the kid's screaming, it feels wrong.
But if doing that administered medicine that would keep him alive in the face of some pathogen, you would still do that, momentary pain.
But I think as a parent, to deny that, to just write that off, is not healthy.
Yeah,
you should explore that.
You should make sure that what you're doing is worth it. Yeah.
But we weren't even doing that.
No, we weren't. Yeah. Well, how would you make sure?
Right.
So we're going to talk about RFK in a minute because this is coming to the forefront in the political world. But how would you, as a normal person who's probably not a molecular biologist or a chemist, figure out all of the different ingredients and what ratio and how your individual body would react to them to make that risk-reward calculation for yourself?
To find the information is an exploration in of itself. It is, you have to devote so much time and energy to it because the people who have a vested interest in vaccines actively suppress that information. And I know that makes me sound like a cuckoo crazy, but you have to remember the Aaron Brockovich movie. What's it called?
Aaron Brockovich.
Oh, okay. There's the scene, and that's based on a true story. And there's the scene where Aaron Brockovich goes to the mother's house, and the whole family has like this litany of health problems, as they do in the surrounding township or whatever it is. And the girls, her daughters, are outside swimming in this pool filled with this water. And everybody's got cancer and random health complications, autoimmune disorders. And so Aaron Brockovich is researching, and she finds out that there's this chemical in the water that leaked from this industrial plant called...
I forget the name of the company, but it was the power company out there that was using some kind of chemical on their equipment, and it seeped into the groundwater.
Yeah, the toxic chemical. And the mom looks at Aaron Brockovich, and the mom is skeptical that their health problems are caused because of this leak. And she goes, well, we went to the doctor, and the doctor said that the levels in the water were safe. And Aaron Brockovich looks her in the eye and says, and who paid for that doctor? And the mom realizes that it was the company that paid for the doctor that told her that the water that her children were drinking and playing in was safe. And she realizes the conspiracy right in that moment. And she gets up and she runs outside and she screams at her girls, get out of that pool, right? You can see the realization hitting her. And it's overwhelming. You're looking a little overwhelmed.
Well, yeah, I'm remembering how the mom felt, and just completely helpless because what do you do at that point? Okay, your water's poison.
It's done.
And you've been giving
Yeah.
it to your kids their whole life.
And we felt that way when we were listening to this podcast with RFK and Joe Rogan. And I cried.
Yeah.
Because it's like, what's done is done. I can't take those things back. So the second time around with the second kid, we did things differently because we realized that the health, quote, experts in the federal government, who are the ones writing this medical script that we keep talking about, are not invested in the science primarily. And the incentives are so perverse in government that it is very easy for corruption to proliferate. And not even corruption, really. I don't even want to make them sound that organized. It's really just they don't care to make sure that there are no consequences. There's no...
I think it's the same thing that we were talking about before. It's the same argument that some libertarians make about why you shouldn't vote. I think it might be called rational ignorance, but people are busy. They're living their lives. They don't have time to track down all of this data to make an informed decision. And that applies in voting, that applies in health. So the doctor is responsible for how many ailments across the human body. They might specialize in one or two, but if they're just taking a general approach to medicine, they're going to trust the specialists doing the breaking research, and they're not going to be able to track down every single study and read everything.
But even before the doctors, the health, quote, experts in the CDC and the FDA and the USDA, the revolving door between big pharma and these federal agencies is greased so slick that you get confused about who's advocating for who.
Yeah, and that makes the problem of rational ignorance harder because then it's in their monetary interest to not to look at things.
And that's what I think they're doing. I think they're choosing to not look at certain evidence. I don't think they're sitting there saying, hey, let's poison a generation of kids and make everybody sick on purpose so that we can govern them as a ruling class.
No.
I think that's kind of like a romantic dystopian idea, but I don't think that's actually what's happening. I don't want to give them too much credit because they're not that smart. So the second time around with the second kid, I was turned on to this book and this vaccine schedule by a group, my underground mom group that is, and I wouldn't say anti-vax, I would just say vaccine skeptic, which is, I like that. I think it kind of moderates both sides because every child is different. So you might have a kid born with immune deficiencies and the risk reward algorithm for them is going to look different than my kid who, you know, is, praise God, totally healthy, eats a ton of food, goes outside, plays hard, sleeps great.
When he's not teething.
When he's not teething. His algorithm is going to look different than a kid who's got leukemia or some autoimmune disease or something like that.
Or lives in an area like Oregon where measles is common.
And to even say that to a doctor, to say, hey, let's individualize a vaccine plan for my kid, you're crazy. So, but I was turned on to this book, The Vaccine Friendly Plan by Dr. Paul Thomas. I know that I'm going to have moms message me after we publish this saying like, well, what did you do? So I'm just going to say this now. If you Google Dr. Paul Thomas, the people who moderate the internet have made him to be a crazy conspiracy, an Alex Jones in the medical world. But like I've said before, it turns out the frogs are actually gay.
Yeah, we heard to mention RFK
RFK
again.
RFK says that. So that's all I'll say about it. But the most powerful part of this book, and this graphic is floated around online, is just a comparison of the vaccine schedule between like 1962 and 1980 to now. Now it's upwards of 70 vaccines before your kid is 5. And in 1962 or 3, somewhere around there, it was 3. And he goes through every single vaccine, tells you what's in it, and he does the risk reward calculation for you. He says, here's what's in it, here's what it could do, and if your child has this list of conditions, you might consider delaying this until they're 3 when their brain is about 80% formed.
And most of his recommendations are delay, not avoid completely.
Because he is pro-vaccine. Like the vaccine technology, it's a good thing that we have a vaccine technology. We just need to use it appropriately, and it's important to individualize it to the kid. And we should consider improving our vaccine technology and making it less toxic along the way, because our kids are already swimming in a toxic soup, as RFK said.
That's a good transition. So we've been hearing a lot about Robert F. Kennedy Jr. running for president on the Democratic side. He's primary challenging Joe Biden. We've heard a lot about him in our circles of people being like, oh, well, he was skeptical of the COVID vaccine. He seems to be against endless war. Maybe he's saying some interesting things and he's worth listening to.
The only thing that I had heard of him was that I just knew he got censored a lot online. And I was like, oh, he seems like a guy I might like.
Yeah, I think they kicked him off Instagram for COVID stuff.
And YouTube. And then I saw him doing the podcast circuit. And so he was associated with people that we generally like. He's on Joe Rogan a lot.
No, he was on Theo Von a lot.
Theo Von.
Because before being known for vaccine skepticism, he was known as an environmental lawyer. And specifically working with commercial fisheries and hunters, not just like chaining himself to a tree kind of thing. So he's more in the conservation side of it, and Theo Von's a big outdoors guy, so they would talk about
Oh, I didn't
that
realize
kind of
that. I thought he was just crude and like very
No,
funny.
like RFK trained hawks or something, and so Theo Von was talking about how to hunt with a hawk or a falcon.
Okay. I really like that group. What was it referred to? Bullets and hooks?
Yeah, something like that.
Like the guns and hunting and fishing crowd. They are a lot better conservationists than the urban Greta Thunbergs.
I agree, because they
are doing it. They're doing it.
Well, they're actually doing it, but their philosophical perspective is how we can live in harmony with nature, not how to keep it in a box unchanged, as if humans didn't exist, because we're here too, right?
And they have such like more of a holistic approach, and they consider the entire ecological equation, as opposed to saying like, oh, this particular wolf population, their numbers are dwindling. We need to do whatever it takes to get them back to whatever threshold. Is it something in the water? Is it something about the habitat? How can we improve the habitat to more naturally boost this population? And then we won't have all of these, unintended consequences everywhere else. They just take a broader look at it. And I think that's better in life, that sort of approach.
And that was something RFK said on the podcast. They were specifically talking about his perspective on environmentalism, and he said he doesn't put it in terms of catastrophic global climate change because that's unpersuasive. That puts everybody in their partisan camps. He says he wants to approach environmental issues from an ecosystem level. So if you're trying to save the whales, you look at what's harming the whales and try to make sure. He put it in terms of habitat protection and restoration.
Yeah.
So if everybody's able to live, then we've reduced the pollution and whatever other factors are making it harder to survive.
I really like that. I think it fits better into what we mentioned earlier, the command to shepherd the earth. Like, we are responsible for taking care of.
Yeah, it's a biblical command.
Should we start off, though, talking about, like, the fact that he is a Kennedy and how we feel about that? JFK is his uncle?
Yes. And his dad was the Attorney General, Bobby Kennedy.
Who was in a car that was on a bridge? Wasn't there a Kennedy?
That was his other uncle, Ted.
I can't keep all this straight because I'm not
So
a boomer.
JFK was the president who got shot in Dallas.
Okay. Yep.
Did
he?
Teddy Kennedy. No, he was shot in Dallas. But the question is by
who did it?
Yeah.
Okay.
The Ted Kennedy was the senator from Massachusetts who was driving and drove off the bridge and left the girl in the car.
Who was the girl?
I think her name was Mary Jo.
Like, what was the
Kopechne.
relation? Was it his wife?
No, I think they were leaving a party. I don't think they were.
But he just left the girl in the car and saved himself?
Yes.
Did she die?
Yes.
Oh. Okay. And then, is it Joe Kennedy?
He was a congressman, I want to say.
Massachusetts?
I think so. I don't remember what.
He had the whole, like, chapstick thing.
You
don't
know more than me.
It was a meme for a while.
Okay.
And then there's this guy.
So RFK Jr., RFK, brother of JFK, was also assassinated
Oh,
Yeah.
why?
So that's a thing that comes up with RFK Jr. He says it was the CIA, and he also believes the CIA killed JFK, even though they arrested Sirhan, the communist Palestinian who shot RFK. RFK Jr. believes it was some racist bodyguard that happened to be at the hotel at the time.
This is not some like casual family history. Like this is worth talking about.
Well, and he does, and that's why people see him as a fringe figure, even though most of the corporate media says, oh, vaccine skeptic RFK Jr. challenges Biden. When you get into it, they also get upset, and they'll even quote, other members of the Kennedy family don't agree with his assessment of the intelligence community.
Oof, this is a lot. So like perhaps the deep state is like censoring him on purpose because
That would be his contention.
and I saw that he wants to release all of the JFK documents, which no one has done.
Oh, definitely.
And I was like, this is so many levels of inception. I can't wrap my head around it. Okay.
So I know I listen to Chapo Trap House and you don't. They have a whole series about George H.W. Bush and their theories about how he was connected to the JFK assassination. The Zapata oil hat and all that. We don't need to get into it. But that's how I know some of these details, is listening to them. And they don't agree with RFK Jr. So
maybe RFK is a deep state plant?
Oh, I don't know.
Dressed up as a fringe alternative.
But not so fringe, right? So Marianne Williamson's polling at 8%, which is pretty good when you have an incumbent president who's running for re-election. RFK is like at 20.
Would you vote for him?
No.
You wouldn't?
No. But
why not?
As much as I appreciate what he's saying about the corruption between the public health agencies and big pharma, okay, cool. All on board with that. As much as I agree with him on foreign policy. So one of the big things, he's consciously channeling his uncle, talking about how the Russians sacrificed so much in World War II and kind of JFK's approach to the Cold War, and saying in the context of Ukraine, we need to have peace and not continue to exacerbate the Russians and find an off-ramp. And he's from that camp that says everything that America's doing is making it worse. And so he would change his approach there. I'm generally sympathetic to that view. In fact, it's like in my top 3 issues that I evaluate a candidate on. So he's a check there. And even his approach to environmentalism. So if you're worried about heavy-handed climate regulation, he was, at least if what he said to Joe Rogan is to be believed, he said he wants to use the free market. Or if he didn't say it to Joe Rogan, it was in another interview with Jordan Peterson. He said he wants to make it where farmers can have windmills in their fields and you can have rooftop solar, and we'll use federal dollars. So that I don't like that aspect of it, but a big infrastructure investment in the grid so that these people can sell the energy that they produce from these renewable sources onto the grid. Because the biggest problem right now, he says, is that our grid is out of date and needs major overhauls.
Which is true.
And so he would focus there so that we can reduce reliance on oil and gas. He wouldn't ban them with a law and he wouldn't cancel leases, but he would make it to where everyone would be able to have their own renewable energy and we just wouldn't need oil and gas. If he's honest about that, and he would end subsidies to oil and gas, I agree with that too. If he would do that, that would be great. That's appealing to me. Let's talk about it. I don't like the idea of spending billions of dollars on a federal boondoggle, but let's talk about it. I mean, would prefer that to cap and trade or whatever.
Yeah. Isn't the argument for immigration sort of similar? Like if you want efficient but secure immigration processing right now, we're completely understaffed in that part of...
Yeah, we need a lot more dollars to have people down on the border processing these people.
So it would first require a bigger investment if you want more efficient immigration processing.
Yeah, but the question is it the federal government's job to build this infrastructure? There are a lot of arguments even on our side, yes, like your old boss likes infrastructure stuff.
Or his constituents.
Constituents. So like it's on the list of things I hate, it would be lower down.
Okay. Well, so why wouldn't you vote
So why
for
wouldn't I
him?
vote for him?
Yeah.
He's still on the left on the other issues I care about.
Abortion and guns.
I don't know about guns, but abortion, yes.
That sucks.
There's some other things in his past that are not just flippant things that make me wary. The first one is kind of a personal thing, but we're talking about his family, right? He had a cousin who was convicted of beating a teenage girl to death with a golf club. He says that his cousin was framed and has been in prison over a decade for something he didn't do. And it would be fine if he had just laid out that case, but he then accused 2 other people of doing it, and now their lives are ruined.
See, this is complicated. Who has a life like this?
Yeah.
Like,
well, and he's married to Cheryl Hines from Curb Your Enthusiasm, which maybe our audience doesn't know about, but that was a really funny show, and it's still on HBO periodically. Larry David's follow-up to Seinfeld. It's really funny, and she played Larry David's wife early on in the series. But aside from this whole cousin thing, which he wrote an entire book about and has been going on and on about it and has ruined these people's lives. I read an excerpt from an expose on this whole thing, and the guy says he can't go outside. His wife is scared of cameras because RFK accused him of this crime that his cousin was convicted of. And RFK has just said in response, okay, let him sue me.
Beforehand, I was otherwise completely unfamiliar with who RFK was. The great contradiction is that he is from this completely other class of people. He is from an entirely different, what do they call that in India?
Caste.
Different caste than I am. He grew up in a totally different world where it's just casual to have 2 of your family members assassinated and like high profile murders among your family tree. So, but he does, maybe he's just an excellent actor. I don't know. I don't know this guy. He comes off very authentic and very in tune with everyday Americans and the struggles that everyday Americans are faced with. And beyond that, not only is he familiar with that, he's sympathetic to it. And then beyond that, he's ready to solve problems on behalf of those people. And it comes off like he's very genuine about it.
Yeah, I agree. And I liked most everything he said on Joe Rogan, talking about his motivation for being an environmentalist, being like that's how you commune with God, and he wants to preserve all the diversity of butterflies so his children can go and experience nature like he did and anticipate the changing leaves as he did as a kid.
When he was
That's
talking
beautiful.
about that, taking your son to go fishing and having a quiet Saturday morning with your kid or whatever. It's
and
like,
that you can't do it because all of these companies have let mercury go into the water and all of the fish in North America are poisoned. And he is a lawyer and he's positioned to stop that. That was great.
Yeah.
I want him fighting those things.
And when he was talking about the moms of intellectually disabled children that they were trying to advocate for these kids and were convinced that it was the vaccines that did this to their children, the way that he talked about those moms and the way that he even talked about his own wife was like very honorable, and he was not condescending whatsoever. He said somebody needs to listen to these women, somebody needs to hear what they have to say and defend them. And then when he was talking about his wife, it was a side comment, but I thought it spoke positively to his character as a man and as a husband. He said, I advised my wife not to read the book that he wrote about Dr. Anthony Fauci because it was so depressing, and quote, her job is to make people laugh. And he doesn't want to color her experience of life and have that affect who she is as a person because the book is so heavy. I just thought that was very beautiful for him to even be in touch with that and to put himself to the side and tell his wife not to read the book that he wrote because to protect her. I thought that was sweet.
No, it was.
Maybe I'm just stupid. Maybe he's like...
No, he doesn't come across as a politician. I think he genuinely believes the things he's saying, which is why I worry, because he also has a history of saying other things.
Right. Like, should we be more skeptical of him?
I'm not skeptical of the things we've already talked about. I agreed with most of the policies I heard, or I'm at least willing to hear him out, and I want to hear it debated. And just to put a fine point on it, he's not for banning vaccines. He just wants to... I'm just asking questions. He wants there to be a full-on open debate so that people can make these decisions for themselves and not feel like everything's being forced down their throat by the federal government. So when I hear things like that, I'm like, okay, great. Let's have him at either the FDA or the EPA and have him protect the environment or oversee NIH and figure out our public health agencies. Or even have him at the Department of Defense or the State Department and figure out our foreign policy. But I don't know that he would be a good commander-in-chief. And here's where I think you'll agree with me that he goes a little off the deep end. Going back to environmentalism, it was just in 2014, so less than 10 years ago, he either wrote an article or gave an interview that said the Koch brothers, Charles and David who was still alive at the time, should be in The Hague tried like war criminals.
Wow.
Because of their suppression of the truth about climate change. And since they're in the oil and gas industry and chemicals, they have used their money to poison everybody. And I don't remember if he said death penalty, but needed to at least be in jail forever. And he did say that about Don Blankenship, that guy who ran the coal company in West Virginia who ran recently.
So is he just like riding the tide of whatever counterculturalism says is popular at the time?
On the left,
the
maybe.
Yeah.
And so he went beyond, when people freaked out at that, when he said that about Charles and David Koch, he responded as a lawyer specifically. He said, no, what I mean is, and I don't remember if this was at salon.com or whatever, I'm going off the top of my head from an article I read. He said, no, state attorneys general need to look at these companies and take away their corporate charter and give them the death penalty. We need to get rid of these companies.
Wait, and the death penalty, like kill?
For the companies. So take away their charter, take away all of their assets, block them from being able to do business and harm people, is what he's saying. And he listed the companies. Exxon, there was some southern oil company, the American Enterprise Institute.
Oh.
Yeah. The Heritage Foundation.
Okay.
The State Policy Network. The American Petroleum Institute. So he was saying that the Koch brothers funneled and launder all of their dirty oil and gas money through these front groups to deny the harms that the oil and gas industry causes. And so we need to get rid of all of those groups. And he said this less than 10 years ago and would use, like, it wasn't just an offhand comment. He said, here is how state attorneys general could do this and actually implement this policy, and advocated doing that. That's a problem, especially when he's running now on a platform of anti-censorship and pro-free speech. How are you going to say that the oil companies can't advocate their position just as much as he can? And maybe COVID changed his mind, but I haven't heard him address these issues. If he's really for a free market and energy development, then we should talk about it. I'm all for getting rid of subsidies for oil and gas, but I don't want to destroy them either. That wouldn't work.
I feel like free market is similar to the label liberal anymore. Like, it means very different things to different people.
Yes. Yeah, because on the right, you have the people, the national conservatives, who want an industrial policy, because anything that, I don't want to speak in too broad a generalization, but anything that's not managed by some rational actor would then be just left up to corruption in the private sector.
Well, those sort of views would be particularly concerning, especially with what I was going to say as a positive thing, but could be a double-edged sword if some of those feelings of his resurface, was that though he is from this other caste system, one benefit to that is that he seems to have a firm understanding of how government works. Yeah. Which I know was a critique of Trump, in that he could have gotten more things done if he had been more familiar with how the process works.
Yeah, that's one of the biggest arguments in favor of Ron DeSantis, and he's actively campaigning on that point. He said he studied the Florida Constitution to know exactly what levers he could pull as governor to get his agenda through, and he's doing that with the federal Constitution and the laws, and would be able to do that as president.
And I know that's a critique that a lot of conservatives have of the GOP, is that they don't go into these elections or these offices with any sort of plan ahead of time with what they're going to do. Yeah. And because bureaucracy churns so slowly and it takes so long to get through all of this red tape that you really do day one have to have a firm plan and understanding of how that process works if you want to actually make any change.
I agree. And I don't want to derail the conversation, but I remembered something else I wanted to say about his approach to environmentalism. I think using state attorneys general to issue the death penalty on oil and gas corporations is too much. But at the same time, I don't want oil and gas companies to be able to poison the water and kill fish and children and whatever else with emissions and whatnot.
Well, when we were listening to the podcast with Joe Rogan, and he said that when he was in New York, he was suing companies that were polluting the waters, you and I looked at each other and we were like, well, they should be sued.
Exactly. And so that's a problem academically called externalities. So no one's, well, not all the time, they're not intentionally polluting, but it's a byproduct of producing this good that everybody wants, energy in this case. We have to find a way to price that into the good.
Mm-hmm.
So if that means that the price of energy has to go up because these companies are responsible for mitigating all of the harm that they do,
mm-hmm.
I'm fine with that. And that's how it should be, because otherwise it's up to these families to pay all these medical bills, or everybody to have worse food and worse health outcomes, right? It should be these companies' responsibilities to mitigate whatever harms that they're causing. And so the government should be empowered to notice whatever harms are being caused. But shutting them down isn't like, then they don't have any money to help anybody, right? We still need the energy from them. They're in a position, or should be required to be in a position, to mitigate the harm that they cause. I want to figure out a system that goes in that direction. The same thing applies in immigration. Maybe this example will make sense. A lot of the debate in Congress right now over what's going on at the southern border breaks down into, I want a closed border, or I want to let them all in. And a lot of the Democrats in Congress are saying, well, who's going to pick our food? Farmers need illegal labor because no one else is going to do...
I don't think they're saying it like that.
They're pretty explicitly saying nobody is going to pick our food. Farmers need them or they're going to go out of business.
We need our second-class citizens.
Exactly. It's disgusting.
Like Get Out, the movie Get Out.
Yes, it's disgusting. Like, whatever, if you actually have a humanitarian concern for people coming in claiming asylum, that's different from saying, I need this low-wage labor force that I want to import. That's gross. But my point is, part of that argument is, if we don't have these people that we can pay nothing because they have no recourse, because if they go and complain, they'll get deported, then the price of all of our food will go up. Good. That should be priced into our food. If it costs a lot more because you have to pay people real money to go out and pick it if they are legal citizens or whatever, then you should have to pay whatever it costs to not exploit people. I don't want strawberries at $5 a carton because it had to be picked by a
slave labor.
Yeah. If you actually have to pay what it costs to harvest these fruits and vegetables, then you'll actually have an incentive to automate some of that work, because you'll have the money there to be able to do the research and development to have a machine that can pick a strawberry without destroying it. And right now, since you're relying on these people that you can exploit, there's no incentive to try and innovate our way out of that problem. So it's actually holding us all back. And the quality might be worse. Like, we have these E. coli outbreaks because people are not clean when they're picking the fruit. If you had to pay them more, they would have more opportunity to wash their hands or whatever, and we would have better food.
Okay, so if we're going to go down the immigration road, this is one thing I like to randomly, I'm so fun at parties, I like to randomly poll people and ask how they feel about immigration.
Why do you do that?
Because I try and take the temperature and just like figure out like how extreme I am on my position sometimes. So like generally people, like no matter who they claim to like politically in terms of candidate or whatever, generally people want immigration. They want legal immigration, and they want it to be as efficient and safe as possible.
If they want it at all.
So like well, I think there's a lot of conservatives who would not agree with that position. I agree with it, but yeah, you. I'm
Me?
looking at you.
Yeah. There's a book on my shelf by Mark Krikorian, The New Case Against Immigration, Legal and Illegal. And I'll just make his case here and we can talk about that. The reason you don't want unlimited immigration, especially in 2023, I think we can all agree.
The reason you don't.
The reason one shouldn't want open borders or unlimited immigration is because Americans hate our country enough as it is.
Mm-hmm.
And so adding people at a rate higher than we could even assimilate them into liking our country when we can't even teach our own citizens to like our country seems to be a recipe for disunion and destruction.
We've had this conversation a million times. So it seems like the problem is education rather than immigration. So I don't know why you would stop immigration while you fix or don't fix.
Because it would make the problem worse. It's hard enough to educate the people that are already here. How would you also educate even more people? And it's not education in the sense that you send them to a place and a teacher tells them how they should think civically. We would have to live out this way of life that we're talking about, self-government. We can't even do that on our own. How would we do it with more people?
Really don't like the idea of denying someone the American dream if they are familiar with it and know about it and want to live it.
That's a big if.
Because of this other group of people who don't.
And that's a fair point. But that's a big if. How do you determine that that's what they want? A lot of these people are economic migrants. They want a better life for themselves, but they don't have a concept of what it means to have self-government. So how does that help America achieve that ideal?
Well, that's even more than a lot of Americans. A lot of these Americans don't necessarily want a better life for themselves, they don't know what it means to be American. So it seems like it might be a slight improvement to allow these people in who at least want to work hard.
But that's my argument, though. Americans don't want to work hard and they hate America, so maybe these people at least work.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, at least they're willing to,
There's a logic there, but I'm hoping that we can recover that sense of America as a place that's free and
that will take generations, though. And in the meantime, you have all of these hard workers who want into the country
that are looking out for themselves. That's the same problem with having all of these transnational corporations being at the head of everything. They don't have a loyalty to our country necessarily, except for what they can get out of it. And I'm concerned that the restoration of America as a good and beautiful place that you love for its principles and for that common shared destiny, I'm worried that bringing more people in just for economic reasons is going to make it harder to do that. I could be wrong, and I'm willing to be convinced, but that's my concern.
Rand Paul talked about this a lot during COVID, about how we should fast track visas for Indian doctors and medical professionals because there was a significant shortage of them and it was an immediate need. Mm-hmm. I think the economic need is immediate. If you want people to love America and prosper in America, which is first how they will learn to love it. If they have a hard life economically, why would I love a country that I can't prosper in? Then you need to allow these people in who will benefit the economic side of things.
Okay. That's overwhelmingly not who's coming in at the southern border. So the 20,000 a month or whatever.
I don't just mean the southern border. I do mean increasing visa allotments.
Yeah, no, I understand that. But the acute immigration debate is the waves of people coming over. That's mostly humanitarian issues where they're not, in a lot of cases, they can't even read how.
Maybe I'm just succumbing to the libtard media, but I don't even think the immigration debate among most normies gets that academic, if I'm being honest.
No, of course it doesn't.
I really do think that it is about they're just different than us in ways that I don't want to be specific about.
Well, that's dumb, and that should be exposed and made fun of.
Okay.
But while we do that... No, not but. As we do that, we should be able to walk and chew gum at the same time and recognize there is a problem.
Yeah.
What was it? Was it libertarians hate it when people say this because Milton Friedman was for open immigration, but he argued that it's stupid to have open immigration with a generous welfare state. And there have been laws passed to try and keep people from having federal welfare benefits for at least, I think it's the first 5 years they're in America. But that immediately goes away when they have a kid who's automatically an American citizen. So then they have access to all of those benefits through their kid. When you have so many people coming over, you can't have a public health establishment, a public education establishment, anything. That's why I'm talking about the rate of immigration, not the quality or whatever. I'm not even talking about where they're coming from. If you have too many that it overwhelms the system, that's unsustainable. That's the basic argument.
I will just say one more time, I don't like denying good people the American dream because our web of policies is tangled. And we need to say, oh, no, you need to just know because you're too late. Well, we have our own problems to sort out in the meantime. I'm uncomfortable with that.
Sure. I want all the good people here too. How can we get them here without making it worse for everybody? Because it's bad for them too if America falls, right?
Yeah. I don't know. I think that's above my pay grade.
Mine too. That's just what I'm worried
wanted
about.
to talk about the high level feels of it because...
Yeah. Feels bad, dude.
Yeah. It feels bad, man.
I read books.
Okay, we should get back to RFK. I have a whole bunch of notes on him.
Oh, okay.
In his Joe Rogan interview, he said one of the reasons, and this was like sort of the pinnacle of the interview. He said one of the reasons he, quote, wants to run for president is to end chronic disease among children. And he has 7 children. So though I said all praised him for what he said about his wife, I'm assuming these children came from a different wife.
I'm assuming. I don't know how many kids, if any, Cheryl Hines has. Let me see.
And then that raises a bunch of character questions for me. Because I don't know how you just have 7 children with someone and then, I don't know, live a life with someone else.
She has 1 child.
I know that's, you could say that's
and
idealistic.
Not with RFK.
Right.
So she has a daughter from a previous marriage.
And he's Catholic.
Nominally.
Oh, okay.
I mean, the family is Catholic for sure. I'm just looking at Wikipedia. RFK was married in 1982, divorced in 94, and then he remarried in 94, and that wife died in 2012.
Oh, now I'm a douche.
And now he's married to Cheryl Hines as of 2014.
Were the children that he had split among those 2 women?
Let me see. I scrolled down to personal life, and the first thing it says was Kennedy is a licensed master falconer and has trained hawks since he was 11.
That's such a niche hobby.
That's awesome. He breeds hawks and falcons as a licensed raptor propagator and wildlife rehabilitator. So no wonder that's his career.
Okay.
That's awesome.
That's so random. I don't know how you randomly get super into that.
He married a woman he met in law school, had 2 kids, and then he had 4 children with his second wife who died. So
there are 6 children?
Yeah.
Oh, he's counting the stepchild because he said, I have 7 children.
Yep.
Wow, he's repopulating the earth here. So, okay. And some other quotes from that interview. He says, quote, curiosity is what made his uncle JFK such a great president because it gave him empathy by considering another person's perspective.
Yeah, specifically in the context of the Russians having sacrificed everything in World War II. That was something I didn't think about. I heard it mentioned on a podcast this week, not even talking about RFK, probably just in the context of Ukraine. I think the quote was something like Russia lost more people fighting Hitler than the rest of the Allies did repelling Hitler's invasion of the rest of Europe.
It was something like 1 in 7 Russians or 1 in 5 Russians died or
something like that.
It was crazy.
In the course of
everyone knew someone who had died in the war.
And it was something like in the course of a month, like December 1942 to January 1943, some ridiculous number of people died.
Yeah, it was catastrophic in relation to their population.
And so in the context of nuclear weapons, you could understand why the Russian people would want to be strong and be able to repel any kind of invasion like that and want to be wary of the West coming in and telling them what to do.
So one of the reasons I was surprised when you said you wouldn't vote for him, because this is a note that I have. He said this is his pitch, is that I know how to unravel corporate capture of the regulatory state and the federal government with his history of litigation, and he wants to make the regulatory process, quote, work faster for the American people. Faster is kind of the operating word there. I don't know that faster is what we want.
Better is vague, but
I don't know that I want it to be like more efficient. I just want it to like do less.
I want the things it does to be legal and effective. Mm-hmm. And I don't want it to do anything else. And so that's why I think he would be great overseeing some of these public health agencies. I don't know what position that would be. I don't know if he would be a good head of the FDA or CDC or whatever. But as an environmental lawyer, he might be good at EPA.
Yeah.
Doing clean air regulation, clean water regulation, making sure that the states are complying with the air quality standards. That seems like something he is really suited for.
I think his appeal in circles of people who are like-minded as us is that there's a lot of resentment for what happened during the pandemic.
Oh, yeah. And he stands up and he's that avatar of the person who was silenced for saying things, and he was unafraid.
And not in the way where Trump was a bully for those that silenced what was it called?
The silent
majority.
Yeah, that was a Nixon thing.
But in a way that he seems intellectual, capable, kind of hot.
Yeah, he was lifting weights with his shirt off the other day. I saw that.
And so for reasonable people who are politically frustrated, he seems like a really decent option.
Yeah, he doesn't do the whole aggrieved thing either, even though he has been censored and suppressed. Whereas when Trump gets upset with all of the opposition he gets from the media and the establishment politicians, it sounds more petulant. And I don't know if that's just me and how I interpret it, but it sounds more petty than when RFK says, yeah, I'm just out here fighting for these moms and no one wants to hear it because they're greedy and Big Pharma's paying them off.
Yeah, I did like that he really did minimize himself and everything that he was articulating. And he was saying, it's not about me, it's about the science. My opinion doesn't matter. These kids matter.
And one thing he did say was that Wi-Fi causes cancer. Mm-hmm. So that's going to be a problem, as that's everywhere. But there is a lot of cancer.
Well, he seemed a little hesitant because Joe on that interview was very interested in that theory. And he was kind of backed off a little bit.
Well, in a way that goes to his favor. He didn't claim expertise he didn't have. He said he couldn't articulate the biological mechanism as to why that would happen, but that he and his firm is representing people who have this specific tumor behind their ear, which is on the side they use their cell phones. So he says there is a concern about the effects of cell phone radiation. He was saying, don't just take my word for it. You can read these studies. And he's had decades of reading the scientific literature to be able to tell when a study is well constructed, when it's reliable, like if it's a randomized control trial or whatever, to determine how harmful a chemical is. None of us are going to be able to do that. So we have to find someone we can trust to figure out what information we should rely on.
See, that was my big takeaway, is that he has a wealth of institutional knowledge in areas that are critical at this moment. So he has knowledge of the political institutions and the political institutions that matter. So at this point in time, we've built up all of this regulatory power during COVID through the FDA
and the
CDC. And he's extremely familiar with that process and those people and the stakeholders that matter. And with food, he talked a lot about glyphosate and pesticides and how that's affecting our food supply and how that's making us sick too. Mm-hmm. And so he's familiar with all of that. And the way that he presents himself, and I'm sure that, he's crafting his message to be this way, but he's presenting himself as the cold medicine for someone who has a cold. Like, he's like, you know.
Yeah, going back to that dynastic point, look, I'm like my uncle. I love America. I want a strong foreign policy, but not looking to cause wars and get into conflict unnecessarily. So like JFK went to the moon, he was talking about building the grid so that we could have essentially free electricity. He was saying the government put up the infrastructure for the internet. Now information is free. The government put up the infrastructure for phone calls. Those were expensive. Now they're essentially free. He wants to do that with energy. That's a big moonshot, so to speak, like his uncle. He's channeling that optimism of the Kennedy name. That's really attractive. But would you vote for him over DeSantis if DeSantis could win? Because what if DeSantis had him at USDA or FDA or EPA?
Yes, I'd rather have DeSantis as president. But I guess the things that concern me about DeSantis, RFK is better at, like war, as a main example.
So realistically, it looks like it's going to be Biden versus Trump. But
you think?
Yeah.
Is that what everything's showing?
That's what it looks
I've
like
just
now.
been,
I mean, there's time. I mean, there's a year and a half to go. We haven't had the first debate yet. And so whoever the current front runners and runners up might change, but it's looking like Thanos inevitable that we're going to have a rematch here. I mean, Trump might be in jail, although that won't stop him from running. So if we wanted an exciting matchup, you'd have Kennedy versus DeSantis.
Wait, I should know this, but I don't. Is he running independent?
No, he's challenging Biden.
Oh, he is. He's running as a Democrat.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So if they have a debate, which Biden has said they won't, it would be RFK Jr., Marianne Williamson, and Biden. But the Republicans have a clown car now, so I don't know how they're going to sort that out.
What does that mean?
There's if you look at a car and all of the clowns start getting out, and there's way more than you would think could fit in a car.
Oh, yeah.
There's too many running.
Well, they did that last time too, didn't they?
I know.
Yeah.
And maybe that shows there is no conspiracy, or is there? Like, to make Trump the nominee.
Yeah.
Because then didn't Trump take over the RNC? So who is in control? Maybe no one's in control, and all of these people just have huge egos.
I think that's probably the case.
Where do they get the money to run, though? Who are these donors wasting money on that instead of like helping people get their first home?
Who's that Republican from Texas that just declared?
Will Hurd?
Yeah.
Former congressman?
He's like Supreme Squish, like...
Yeah, he was a congressman after he was in the CIA for 9 years.
Yeah, that's right. And so what he declared, I think it was like last week, or I don't know. It was
it was
recently,
last week while we were in Texas.
And we were like, how arrogant are these people really? Like, they're just showing their true colors that you think you could win? Or maybe they're just...
People talk about lanes in the primary. He's an anti-Trump Republican. There are a lot of those already running.
Yeah,
so
right.
what does he bring to the
Well,
table?
as we were recording this, the news broke that Republican presidential candidate Francis Suarez, I don't even know who that is. He just had an Aleppo moment. He didn't know what a Uyghur was. You didn't know that Francis Suarez was running for president, Jace?
I've never heard that name before.
I guess he's the mayor of Miami.
Oh, okay.
And he was on the Hugh Hewitt show.
Yeah.
You're familiar.
No. I know. I heard that the mayor of Miami was running. I didn't know that was his name.
And he asked Suarez, will you be talking about the Uyghurs in your campaign? The what? Suarez, the current mayor of Miami, responded, the Uyghurs. Hewitt said, what's a Uyghur? Suarez inquired further. Moving on from the question due to Suarez's inability to identify what a Uyghur was, Hewitt told the mayor, you've got to get smart on that.
Oh, that's awkward. Hewitt always asks foreign policy questions. He was big on the war on terror. There was a book he wanted.
Can you name 3 songs written by this band?
Yeah. There was a book he wanted all the candidates to be familiar with, The Looming Tower, the lead up to 9/11 and the war on terror. I don't know anything about the mayor of Miami. I didn't think he was going anywhere. And it's confusing that he doesn't know what a Uyghur is, considering aside from Russia and Ukraine, the biggest geopolitical issue is China and Taiwan.
Oh, that was the context in which the question was asked. He was talking about the China-Cuba.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, the spy base or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, my. Yeah, that's embarrassing. So if you're commander-in-chief, you need to know things like that.
Yeah, but also at the same time, when Gary Johnson had the Aleppo moment that I was talking about, everyone online was like, how do you not know where Aleppo is? Like, come on. You didn't know either
I
before
wouldn't have
you
known.
Googled it.
Well, I might have known when he did that interview, but I wouldn't have known before. It just happened to be in the news then. I want Biden to have to debate RFK.
Yeah, but it's not going to happen
I
because he
know.
has all the institutional control.
So I'm hoping
There's not enough Adderall in the world that would let him participate in a debate with someone with the intellectual rigor of RFK.
So let's hope if a Republican wins that they have enough humility to see that RFK could raise issues that... No. I think this is important.
He's just going to get Bernie Sanders or Ron Paul. That's all that's going to happen.
Right. I'm speaking optimistically. I'm saying the best thing that could happen was that someone would humble themselves and see that this guy is speaking to issues that millions of Americans care about, and they can find a way to let him use that curiosity to actually help the country.
Mm-hmm.
The president's got a lot to do. If RFK can focus on public health or our agricultural industry, let him do it. Or the environment.
Is that a PC way of saying pipe down?
No, I'm saying give him the actual authority to get into these regulatory bodies and root out that corruption that he's talking about. Figure out a way to actually protect the environment in a way that's consistent with the law. Protect public health that isn't trampling on everybody's rights. Make it to where we have food that we can eat without turning the frogs gay or whatever. RFK has been an environmental lawyer forever. He could go into the EPA or USDA and figure out how to deal with pollution and pesticides. And I think we should utilize his expertise in a way that it could help the country, and everyone would benefit from that.
Yeah, I agree.